Hey everyone, this is Kit with Kit's Cars. I'm here with another video podcast with three of my good car buddies. They're going to try to convince me that older cars are worth looking at, and we'll see how that goes. But yeah, looking forward to talking about classic Porsches and Nissans in this group.
All right. Hey, this is Kit here with Kit's Cars, and I've got some interesting guests to talk about tonight. We have first a very old friend of mine, Terrance, that I think Terrance and I met on, might have been S2KI also,
No,
or
it was before that. I
the
think
hybrid forums.
hybrid forums. I had a CRX I needed a VTEC controller, and that's when I first met you.
Oh,
You had
that's
the
right.
E40, you had the E36 M3 sedan.
Yep. So I'd sold my first S2000, and I bought a VTEC controller for that, and I sold it to Terrance. That's right. That would have been 1999 or 2000, something like that.
Wow.
Yeah, and then Everett, you've met before, and we met through S2KI, and again, I've met more recently through Drive Club. Gen has one of the largest and most extensive car collections, I think, of anyone in San Francisco, given the storage the storage requirements. Ev also has a very large car collection of new and old cars. Terrance has a beautiful 993 turbo. When I met Terrance, he was into Hondas, but I think of him as a Porsche guy because he's had Porsches for so long as well. So I think we should get to know each of you a little bit. So I'm going to ask some easy questions at first, and it'll be, hey, how did you get into cars in the first place? And why don't we hear from Terrance first?
Oh, you're putting me on the spot.
Yeah.
I think like most kids, we were playing with Hot Wheels and that kind of stuff when we're micro machines, anyone remembers that. I think, yeah, shockingly, for the people who know me very well personally, know that my uncle is very into cars. He still is. He's very much into, and he's it was very much an influence. But I think that really came more from my dad. My dad, being an engineer, was very hands-on, and my late grandfather, also very much of an engineer, a hands-on person, got me to building plastic models. So I started building plastic models, and the first one that I probably remember building was a IMSA GTO Fox-bodied Mustang.
Oh,
race car, very cool.
Is that the not to interrupt, but that's one from Revel? Is that correct?
Probably a Revel at the time. Yeah, that was the first one I built. I was maybe 5.
Okay.
Ish. And then from there, things take off. You start to build. You kind of scale up and you start building RC cars and started racing RC cars. And, that was my first, realm into racing. Picked up some sponsorships, started doing it maybe too seriously. Big cars took over. And then that was the history. Yeah.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. I think we've also established the child genius because, I believe I have that same kit, but then I didn't really get my hands on that until I was maybe like 15, 16. So the fact that you were assembling it at 5, okay.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, and Gen, how about you? How did you get into cars?
Yes, hi, this is Barney.
Hi.
I try to replicate Everett's, Dr. Evil, look.
Bring out the dogs.
Yes, so I was born and raised in Japan. And back in late 70s, when I was 10, there's a huge supercar boom, among primary school kids. And, literally every kids know what kind of horsepower Countach or, 365 GT4 Berlinetta boxer can do, blah, blah, blah. And it was a huge movement, because Japanese economy was up on the rise and, all new supercar is finally, hitting Japanese market, and there's a manga called, Wolf of the Circuit that everybody read, and so that sort of tainted me. And around that time, my dream car was a Ferrari 365 GT4 Delrinotto Boxer. I like it because it's 2 kilometers per hour faster than Countach. Although none of these cars made it to 300 kilometers per hour in reality. So, so that sort of tainted me. Then, late 80s, when I got driver's license, all of my friends was driving a Hachiroku or RX-7, and, sort of Japanese economic boom, and, like entry-level sports cars. And, that's kind of how I get started in a car. And as you know, I'm totally tainted and ruined by it.
Oh, wow. Well, for myself, I really wasn't into cars until maybe the age of maybe like around 10 or 11. During that time, it was really my father that got into cars because his very first car when he was studying in Berkeley was a 2002 TII. And shortly after that, he got himself into a 74 Carrera. Later, he would sell that and get into a 79 Turbo. And for myself, I was really never that attached to any of these cars. But when he would take me out for a ride, I would notice that he would get all this attention, from like people are like, oh my God, hey, nice car. And so that sort of kind of connected me to, okay, you know what? I kind of like, I like that attention, and seeing how my father was getting it from his cars. I slowly kind of got into looking at cars myself, and that's really the I guess the impetus to how I became a car guy today. Yeah. So mine was pretty simple. I'm just an attention whore, so yeah.
The way I got into cars was actually as a fallback plan, because I originally was into airplanes and things that fly, and knew everything about airliners and fighter planes and stuff like that. And when I made the realization that my vision wasn't good enough to become a fighter pilot, I was like, forget those things. I want to drive. And ever since then, it's been cars. But I've been fairly car obsessed. I used to bring car magazines to school, and I used to get made fun of because I would quote car magazines, and people would be like, "What are you talking about, dude? I don't get your reference." But yeah, it's awesome to finally meet some like-minded car enthusiasts. When I was growing up, most of my friends were not super into cars, so it's good to share the obsession with fellow people. Mm-hmm. But okay, next question. What was your first cool car?
Okay, I'll answer that one first. So I think my very first cool car was, this is really random. So on my senior year, my father had, we had another shop called Group EBJ. And what it was at the time, a gray marketer, a gray importer of European car parts. So for a short time being, we were kind of like dabbling into the importing of gray market Recaro seats, Momo steering wheels, BBS wheels, and all that stuff. And during that time, we also imported in, I believe it was an 85, 86 Euro Spec 325i. It was an E30 short bumper, and we had installed an entirely new BBS body kit on it. We had these 15 by 7 inch offset 25 BBS RS wheels, and it was just decked out. And during that time, it was just sitting in our kind of like our shop showroom. And until I got my license back in 1990, I basically took that car out, and it was still rather, kind of like newish because the E36 haven't come into the market. And at the time, the 325i had slightly more torque than the E30 M3. Okay. And, just back then in the 80s, there was this whole, aftermarket scene. So if you had something with like an aero kit with like BBS wheels, I mean, that was really happening. So that was probably my very first cool car that I ever got behind the wheel of. Yeah.
Awesome.
I can't think of what the first cool car was, because for those that know me well, I never had that many cars since I first started driving, and I'm thinking back a little bit, and maybe the first cool car I had when I first met Kit was '89 CRX, and that was when I got into things like autocrossing and track days in the early 2000s. So I had '89 CRX SI. I found it locally in the Bay Area, and I mean, I made that thing a track car. Spent all the money I needed to do on the suspension, put a VTEC head on a stock D16, and I put a JDM front on the car.
Oh,
so one of the first few at the time. It was a very rare thing to do a JDM look on a car out here in the late '90s, early 2000s. It was very fresh. So I thought that was a relatively cool car. It smelled like a homeless most of the time because the water would leak in through the sunroof and it'll come in through like the rear windows and the taillights, and then just soaks up the rear of the car and just smelled terrible. But it was a cool car. I liked it. I had disc brakes on all four corners. It was a great car.
What suspension were you running back then, Terrance?
I think I did a couple times. I ran some. I think the last suspension had on there was some tins at the time.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Very JDM setup, like 600 or 800 pound rear springs and like 300 pound springs, very over snappy. But that was the only way you can drive the car. You have to drive it like that, right? Some relatively wide wheels, 15x7s all around, 38 offsets. They're definitely going to a rub at any time. But it was a fun car, very light. What are those things, like 200 pounds at most? Yeah.
Wow. Hey, but I gotta say, I mean, just from hearing the type of suspension you chose, I mean, back in the day, I mean, if you had some money or if you were like on a budget, you weren't even looking at Haynes. You were looking at like suspension techniques or some yellow conies, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You would do some conies and ground controls or something, or you get sponsored by your Visa card and you go get some tin for $1,600. But it was a lot of fun. That was a great car. It looked cool. It was pretty fun. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Gen, how about you?
Yes. So I think my first cool car is when I started working in Japan at the advertising agency. Start making decent money, and I guess on my second bonus, good friend of mine, convinced me to buy 1975 and 1976 930 Turbo. That was
wow.
One of my dream car. That was, good deal, but that was stupidest move because who buys,
like
turbo boosted car, sudden turbo boosted car, at a fast Porsche. And, of course, I crashed it within a year in Metropolitan Highway in the middle of the night in Tokyo. And, what I did was just typical, lift on a corner. So it's really spun 3 times and hit the wall. And, but luckily I had the insurance, and also kind of that got me determined that I need to be able to master how to drive 911. Yeah. So I try to learn from the mistake.
That's quite a car to have
with
in Japan. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's quite a car to have in Japan. Going down the Wangan at 3 o'clock in the morning at 300 kilometers an hour in that car with 4 gears, right?
Yeah, it was Sunday night, 1 a.m. and no traffic.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
And the 76 had no intercooler, right?
No
intercooler.
intercooler.
Yeah.
No G50.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get a 915
Full
where
speed.
you think you're in second gear, but you might be in like fourth.
That's
Oh
awesome.
yeah.
So my first cool car was a 1986 Mazda RX-7, and I knew nothing about the car. I went out and it just looked cool, so I bought it. Knew nothing about it. I showed up and the guy had warmed the car up and everything. I was like, oh, that's really nice of him. Started the car up and drove it around, and it drove and it made cool noises and it went kind of fast. I was like, sold. Here's the money. So drove it all the way home, parked it. The next day, I started the car up and just billowed out smoke, and I was like, uh-oh. And then it stopped. I was like, oh, okay. So well, I drove it for the whole summer, loved the car, but every time I'd start it up, it'd be this huge smoke cloud would billow out of the car for the first 30 seconds. And it turns out that this is a sign that the apex seals in a rotary motor were about to die. And Mazda got really good at making replacement motors that would last for the 12-month warranty period of 13-month. They'd basically puke their guts out. And he had sold it to me at probably the 10th or 11th month.
So this would have been the Mazda FC then, right?
FC, first year of the FC before they had a turbo. It had the passive rear wheel steer, the four-wheel steering that had a really soft bushing. So when you run around corners, the tires would tow itself out. That was a great idea.
That was kind of like the Japanese Porsche 944, wasn't it? Yeah.
No, it was a great car, and I wasn't really into performance stuff then. So unlike Terrance, making his car all track ready, my idea of modifying the car was sticking 3 JL Audio 10W6s in a huge box directly behind my head with a Hyphonic Store amp that basically made me go deaf. That's why I can't.
I mean, I went through that phase too, because in high school I drove a '97 Civic, and so the EK chassis coupe automatic.
Nice.
And we would we would go out to our study group on Friday nights or Saturday nights, because I lived in the Bay Area. I lived in Milpitas. You would study at 1 o'clock in the morning on the weekends, or go out on Wednesday nights to Sears Point drag strip or SAC. And you go there and they're like, I'm driving this automatic Civic, but I'm going to go win the bracket drags, because it doesn't matter if I'm running a 17.5 1/4, right? Because I'm the most consistent guy there.
You're going to run a 17.5 no matter what you did.
Exactly. It doesn't matter what you did. You can do a neutral drop, doesn't matter. But I turned that kind of into a show car, and I slammed that car really low to the ground. No coilovers. I mean, you just, you do what you need to do to get the thing super low.
Cut coils.
Yeah. But I always kept it clean. I had a Mugen front lip on it, so it was very low to the ground, but it looked nice, and it kept generally the stock body. And I've always, of all the cars I've owned that I've modded in any fashion, I've always tried to keep the body pretty stock and just have little bits here and there. Keep it clean, and nothing too irreversible usually. Yeah.
Well, I mean, go ahead, Kit.
I generally tried to do the same thing, except when I had my S2000, I went too low and offset a wheel, and I ended up bending the fenders really badly because it was rubbing everywhere. So when I rolled the fenders, I pulled them really hard, and I pulled them too hard and cracked the paint. Yeah. I don't screw around with wheels that don't fit anymore.
Well, just imagine if we all kept those cars that we first had today. I mean, from Civic to 930 Turbo to Mazda, FC. Wow, that would have been something else.
If you go and watch the latest Hagerty, there's a Hagerty's putting up quite a number of videos just all around, and one of the recent ones I just saw last night was on that second gen CRX that I had, an 88 to 91 CRX, and their estimated price for a clean stock one, very good condition, was like $15,000.
Oh wow!
Yeah. I paid $1,900 for mine.
Wow!
I sold that one for $4,000 because somebody wanted it, but what, $15,000 for a CRX?
Yeah.
And to be honest, it's a lot of fun. The car is a great car. Yeah.
I like it too.
My friend works at the Bring Trailer Beans bought CRX last year, and of course from Bring a Trailer, and he gave me a key for a few days, and I had such a nice time, doing twisties and mount time in CRX. I think his was 88. I think he paid 12,000 for it, but
Oh, wow.
it's just a fun car. It's kind of really reminded me of when I was young.
Yeah, it's definitely a car that makes you feel pretty young and stay pretty young. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is actually a perfect transition, because one of the things that makes me different from the other three guys is that I don't really get old cars that well. I'm very much a new car guy. I like my heated seats. I like my CarPlay and all this, and you just don't find that on older cars. And I realize there's a certain charm about older cars. I used to really enjoy driving a friend's CRX because it was so much lighter than just about anything else out there. And I remember my second gen Miata, which was similar weight, tons of fun. But I'd love to talk a little bit more about what makes old cars so interesting. And what's your, if you could pick cars from any decade, what would your favorite decade be?
Let me start. My
Sure.
favorite decade is 1960s to very early 70s. These are the period, manufacturer doesn't need to think about the, safety of the driver. So, cars, they really put the effort to keep it right. Don't worry about much of the safety feature. And also, there was not much concern about the emissions, so they can do lots of dirty motor at powers and torques and stuff. And to me, these are the eras that the car is most pure. That's why I like this period. When it comes to 50s, I felt like it's just too slow.
Yeah.
60s is a meaningful power, as you can still feel, you can still enjoy it and keep up with modern fast cars. Yeah.
I think if I had to pick a decade, I'm going to define it as a range.
Sure.
And I think it's like 85 to 95 cars. I think those are a very key decade, because you're in this transition phase of these really ugly headlight kind of things. Cars are still very lightweight. There's very manual. Everything came in a manual. You get any car in a manual, basically. You get a Previa in a manual, right? And it's super cool. And then you kind of transition to this like slightly modernish, early 90s cars, Supras, RX-7s, 3000 GTs, you name it. Those are all such great cars. They were my high school car. Like the 911s, the 964s, 944 turbos, very cool cars, very unique, but they're just simple enough that they don't have climate control. You want heat, turn on the heat. You want cold, you turn on the cold, right? There's no memory of anything. So you just go there, you make your adjustments. There's just less things to kind of deal with. And you hop in, turn the key, and then you drive it. And then they're just very simple cars.
I totally agree with you. After 74, everything became downhill in terms of speed and stuff. But by late 80s to early 90s, I think car makers finally figured out how to make clean air but pretty powerful engine, and decent safety feature and creature of comfort. By early 90s, like as Terrance said, 964, Ferrari 355, and that kind of car. And I think also market also agrees in terms of value-wise. These are like late 80s, early 70s car, early 90s car value is going up roof right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've seen the NSX go crazy. The S2000s, there's a lot of cars in that era that, I guess the S2000 was a little later than that, but still, a lot of cars in those eras are starting to become very valuable. How about you, Ev? What's your favorite decade?
Well, it's so fantastic to hear what Gen and Terrance has talked about, because For the longest time, I've been trying to figure out, exactly why is it that I love, like 60s, 70s, and then pop up to 90s cars. But then after 90s, it doesn't get that interesting. And I realized that from the 60s, you would buy a car and, it was basically, hey, you either get like a sedan, just for luxury, or you get a sports car, right? And you would just drive that on the weekends. But then if you'll notice, like, as each decade passes, the car manufacturers are trying to integrate both sports car and your sedan for daily use, right? Which is why, you start to have like all these creature comforts, because back in the day, like, again, I don't think you could drive, your 911S, your 67 911S short wheelbase to do, some of the things that you do today, right? There are certain, let's say, key features with, say, 80s cars that, were a major improvement of what the 70s cars were. Because once you have the 80s cars, you didn't want to drive that 70s car every day, okay? So things got a little bit easier and easier and easier. You had, I always joke about it, but one of the key, I think, the biggest, crossovers was basically the cup holder, right? Because people really weren't supposed to be drinking. You're always taught, put your hands on your 10 and 2 when you're driving a nice car, right? But then now, guess what? Hey, this car allows me, well, there's power steering, there's airbags, there's now cup holders, there's functional AC, there's better audio inside the car. So now I can use this not just for spirited driving, but I can actually take that spirited car to work. And so now, once you get into the 2000s, that's when I feel that, okay, that's too much, luxury driving to work. And now you lose that sort of essence of driving, which is why I kind of want to go back to the 70s. So the 70s cars, I would never drive, let's say, my 2002 or my Hako as a daily to work to Oakland. But I will drive it to, say, like Sonoma, if I know that I don't have to stop anywhere. If I'm caravanning with 70s cars, it's a great way to drive. Two of the cars that from like the late 60s that I absolutely love driving. One is the Mini Cooper S, the 1275, and the other one is the Lotus Elan. And if you've driven both these cars, you realize, wow, it is fantastic. But gosh, you can't drive that to the city. You should not even be driving it uphill. You should not be even keeping up with some of these SUVs on the freeway. You just can't. And plus, with today's weather, oh man, you really wish you had air conditioning. And these are some of those things that I think, right when you get to like the early 2000s, that's where my cutoff is in terms of like old cars. But for like like these new M5s with like all the digital controls, and you need to it's not intuitive because it's trying to do more of the what do you call daily things that you want to do that you couldn't do in a sports car, if that makes sense.
It's not just like the little things inside the car, it's also the engines too. I think in that 80s to 90s time, the cars were like fast at the time.
Yes.
But they weren't like absurd like they are today. Like today's cars are they're just another level that they're very fast. Nobody needs, granted, 500 horsepower, 600. It's just insane. But back then you get a car with 200 horsepower and it was fast then. It still, it feels good today, but you can drive the snot out of it and not get into any trouble. And I always tell people this, like driving a slow car fast is so much more fun than driving a fast car.
Yes.
And you can barely go as fast as the guys driving the slow cars. Right.
100% agree. I don't know if I had this conversation with Gen, but most guys who live in the city will tell you, if you're driving, a 901 long hooded Porsche, most people actually prefer a 902, the 912, where it's 4-speed. Okay, it's 4 cylinders. You get to max it up to red line, and you have great fun just rolling up and down, the gears on a 4-cylinder car in the city. Than if you had, a 6-cylinder car. Now, I think Ken is leaning back to disagree, but for me, I've always loved manual shift 4-cylinder cars. Again, harking what Terrance is saying is, it's more fun to drive a slow car fast than a fast car slow.
Yeah.
I'm totally with you. Yeah, that's one reason I like Porsche 356.
Mm,
Uh, 75 horsepower, but you can really push it.
mhm.
Yeah, and it can go fairly fast, even in mountains and stuff.
Yes.
They weigh like
Keep the
1,800
momentum.
pounds, right? They weigh nothing, right?
Yeah.
And sure, I'd love if modern cars were lighter, but my ideal car is roughly 3,000 pounds and 400 horsepower, which is orders of magnitude heavier and more powerful than the cars you guys are talking about. Like my Spider, my 718 Spider feels like a pretty good balance to me. It's not too fast. I can use all the performance it has, and it sticks really well. But it's still tossable, and I can still hang it out. But it has it has heated seats, an automatic transmission, CarPlay. It doesn't have a power top, but all these creature comforts I get in the car.
Well, I think that also kind of comes with our age too, right? Because back when our fathers were driving cars, I mean, the focus was always, you don't even drink drinks in the car. You just focus on driving, and so you don't have that so-called attention. Your attention is just straight on driving, and it's not even about the radio. Sometimes you don't even turn on the radio because it was so crappy, right? And definitely, you're not checking on texts. It's solely driving, and I think the issue, which I think Gordon Murray addressed it a while ago, and he was talking about how the problem with most cars today and going forward is most car manufacturers are trying to use horsepower to compensate for weight of the car. So ideally, I mean, his ideal car really is right around 1,800 pounds and 250 horsepower. And that should get you to, really pretty much all the different, type of roads without really getting you in trouble, right? Whereas a 1,200 horsepower, what is it, the Demon? That weighs what, 4,200 pounds?
Yeah. Too much.
Just insane. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with using horsepower to compensate for weight is it only fixes one of the things that you need to do with the car, which is go fast in a straight line. It doesn't solve the turning or stopping part of the car. In fact, it makes it worse. So,
there's also like that safety aspect of it. I mean, you got a 4,000 pound thing coming at you. That's a lot of energy.
Yep.
And if you have a couple of 1,800 pound cars coming at each other, it's significantly less energy. And especially with today's technology, you build some carbon fiber monocoque, thing. It's very safe at that weight level, but you have so much less stuff to so much less weight to push around and so much less energy to dissipate. So there's a lot of benefits to that. But unfortunately, we're just, carbon fiber chassis cars are not sustainable for the everyday person.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So what's your favorite brand of cars?
I think there's some consensus here.
Yeah.
I suspected it is.
Who's going to say it first?
Let's start with Terrance. Yeah.
It's got to be a Porsche, in my opinion. I think my reasoning for that is I can put the kids in my back of my car and drive them wherever I feel like it. I put my bike on the roof of it. I can put ski racks on it, and I go to groceries. I go to Costco. I take it on small road trips, and it's a fun car. And it's one of the rare. It was a little biased to a 911 because a 911 is a very rare breed of vehicles where you can have a sports car with really good horsepower, handles well. You could drive it to work. You take your kids to school, and it's useful. It's got the back seats that work out really well, and you got it's not a great trunk, but it's a decent trunk. You could put enough stuff in it to get around. So, and plus there's a Macan, right? There's a Macan over on this side of the camera. It's a great car. It's a small 911. It's just the right size of anything for the really good everyday use. Like, there's a ski rack in it right now, and we put a roof box on it, and for a road trip from Monterey Car Week last week. So it's a great car. Great overall, great brand. I think
The Macan.
Yeah, the Macan. Yeah.
All right,
What about you, Jen?
how about you guys? What?
I mean, I have to say Porsche. Yeah, I mean, most of my cars are very old, you know, like starting from 1967 and old generation vehicle. But I also have 991 Targa and 997. You know, like I really admire the fact that the Porsche sort of evolved, you know, pretty much same shaped car into such a, you know, such an all-round car today, but still has a sports car spirit inside. And you know, I like particular engine placement in the back. You know, that the character, you know, I find it very fun. You know, compared to even you know, mid-engine or front-engine car. Yeah. So
yeah, the 911s, even today's 911s, have a different character about them because of the engine placement. You get this this really light, feeling rich steering that you feel like the car can change direction at any time, and that you're fully in control of it. And then you get this engine that kind of comes around behind you and makes sure you turn. It's such an interesting. It's really it's an interesting experience. Definitely remember that from my 911s. Ev, how about you?
Well, this is where it's really random because as Kit knows and Gen knows, I have a few 911s, and these are all cars pre 997.2. But you know, for me, I really like studying, not just, you know, experiencing cars, but also studying, you know, like the history of cars, like the rivalry. And one rivalry, which a lot of people don't talk about, is really the Porsche Nissan rivalry. People always think it's Porsche, Ferrari, but you know, if you go into Asia, it's always Nissan and Porsche. And where I kind of, you know, I love the ergonomics, like just as Terrance and Gen and you love, you know, you jump into a Porsche, it's unmistakable. It fits like a glove, right? No other car brings you to that windshield that close, that intimate. You know, the steering column is also, I mean, it doesn't stick out like 2 feet long, right? I mean, you're seated relatively, you know, you're not kind of like slouched like, you know, you do with a Ferrari. But where I started to kind of lose that 99 or, you know, the 911 interest really started with, you know, starting from the water cooled, where, gosh, you know, I no longer have a dipstick. I can no longer you know, check my tires. I can't open up the front hood without, you know, attaching a battery to it because my battery's dead in front of the front hood. And so then I started looking into, well, you know, what other cars, you know, did, let's just say, went up against Porsche, and let me try those. And the first one was basically Nissan, and Nissan has, you know, unfortunately, they never brought these cars here. They're mostly right-hand drive cars, but the Nissan Skyline, I picked up a 32, and just recently, and we're waiting for the border to open, a 34, which I'll be bringing down. And when you jump behind these cars, it doesn't feel as tight as a 911. I 100% agree, but the driving experience is just as fun. And it's unfortunate that, you know, the R32 never came to the country, but just for like our, you know, our group of friends, Kit, like in Drive Club, I've had on one dent day, I allowed about maybe 6 guys to take the car just to go rip it around town. And everybody came back thinking, wow, you know, I really need to look into this. And one of the guys that I think we all kind of agree is you know, a bona fide, you know, gearhead is Derek Tam Scott, or Derek Scott Tam. And he jumped into it and was really just taken aback. Wow, okay, I didn't know Japanese cars are, okay, this is pretty fun. Let me know before you sell it. And that's where, you know, I kind of got back into, you know, what Terrance was looking for back in the 91s, 92 years, right? In the CRX, because that era of Japanese car is just fantastic. It's lightweight. You know, whether or not you like force induction or you like a naturally aspirated, they both function very well, right? NSXs, you know, your RX-7s, you know, your R32s, even your Supras, they're really good, fun cars to drive. And so getting into more and more of the Nissan, Mark, I've realized, wow, this car company, I mean, it does, I mean, the fun thing with Porsche and Nissan is they've always been kind of going back and forth. Okay. And not a lot of people realize this. I mean, you have your 65 911. Okay. In Japan, there was Prince. And then ultimately there was the 73 2.7 RS. And then Nissan came back with the Nissan GTR, right? The Hakosuka. And then during the 80s, you had, turbocharging, whatnot, until 1989, Porsche said, you know what, we're going to go turbo 5-speed. Okay. Nissan said, you know what, we're going to replicate the 959, which you're not going to make into wide production. We're going to do twin turbo, all-wheel drive, and 5-speed. And so R32s were just like kicking booty, for a good 4 or 5 years, right? Until, you go into, well, guess what? 1994. Then you have the 3.6 Porsche twin turbo, right? Or single turbo. And then, your Nissan comes out with, basically the R33. That rival keeps on going. You go into IMSA, you have the 935 versus, like the IMSA 300ZX, where Nissan also dominated. If you, Bruce Canepa doesn't want to be quoted, but if you ask him, he'll tell you one of the most forgiving and easiest to fun kick-ass cars to drive on track has been basically the Nissan 300ZX. Finally, you have, year 2009 is when the R35 finally comes, right? And Porsche is still, resting on its laurels. Hey, guess what? We're going to run on, twin turbo, all-wheel drive, with the 993s, right? Up to the 996s. And it wasn't until the R35 that came out that Porsche said, you know what, we need to really beef up this Turbo S because, it makes no sense how this R35 GTR is just going around the Nürburgring, at 30 seconds faster than our fastest turbo, right? And so Nissan, I think a lot of people don't talk about it, but they should be given some credit in pushing Porsche to also come up with a better product too. And so there's that rivalry going on. And so that's why, I really hope that, more people go and, take a drive, either with my cars or, just go into and try out some of these Nissans. I mean, the R35, I mean, they still sound pretty, the G35s, they sound pretty good, for a 6 natural aspirated 6. But yeah, I mean, I love Porsche, but up until maybe, like 1994. And then for me, it's all Nissans.
I also had R32.
Yes.
I really didn't like it.
Yeah.
Because, it's things I really don't like about modern car is all there. All these computer controls and twin turbos and it's very easy car to drive fast, but really didn't enjoy the driving it because I felt it's like driving a newer car. Yeah. But I have to credit that R32 was groundbreaking. 993 turbo was there because of R32. And, Porsche Turbo or GT3 still, they need to work harder because of the Nissan, because they can offer these super performance car for 100,000.
Yeah, less. Yeah.
We thank for Nissan for that. Yeah. Competition is good. Yeah.
So, Ev, why do you think that Nissan took so long to bring the GTR to America? What do you think what would you guess the reason is there?
That's a fantastic question because I think this is one thing that I've noticed with like Japanese car manufacturers, right? And again, maybe you can correct me here. With like Nissan and particularly like Toyota, for instance, they'll create a supercar, but then they'll kind of, or even like Honda, right, with the NSX, they'll create a supercar, but then they kind of underprice it because they're not confident to price it, with, let's just say, with other world-class cars, right? You look at, say, for instance, Toyota with the 2000 GT back in the day, all right? I mean, it's a fantastic car. I've never driven one, all right? But it also they did not market it here in the States, really. Okay. Then came the Supra. The Supra was, okay, it's a great car to mod, over in Japan, but then they didn't really put, more, in terms of like the racing and the marketing behind that. And then finally with the LFA, it's like, okay, well, we'll just produce it. It's a halo car, but then, I don't know. I mean, it's there, I can't explain what it is that maybe it's the Japanese being humble about it. But outside of the U.S., your Skylines. I mean, they're really revered. In the UK as well as Australia, in Hong Kong, Malaysia, and then of course Japan. These cars are like, wow. If you were a 35-year-old working professional here in the States, your very first, let's just say, status car would be, it would be, a BMW or maybe a 911. But in Asia, if you're 35 years old, wow, I would get myself into a Lancer Evo 4 or 5. And people are like, what are you talking about, man? Or a Nissan Skyline R32 or Supra, right? I just don't know what it is, here in the States where they just, these car manufacturers, they just don't have the extra to market it. And this isn't actually, come to think of it, it's not just with Japanese cars, it's also with Volkswagen too. Volkswagen dropped the ball with the G60 Golf 2. They could have brought the Rally Golf. They could have brought in the VR6 earlier with the Mark III before they introduced the WRX into the country. They should have brought the RS4 Avant instead of the Cabriolet. They should have brought the RS4 Avant instead of the RS6 Avant today, in my opinion. And so I don't know what it is with these marketing departments, because they have these cars, yet they don't run with it, overseas. And they feel like we don't have like people that are fans or genuinely interested in their cars here in the stateside.
I think a few things that is, first of all, like late 80s, early 90s, US emission standard was toughest.
Oh, yes, there's that too.
So, up until late 90s, every sports car maker delivered US sort of watered down version of the car. You don't get 964 RS or, so that was kind of one major reason you don't get to have why Japanese company didn't export forbidden fruits car to US in early 90s. And, I guess second reason is back in late 80s, Japanese economy was so good. And there was a huge domestic market. They can make a profit out of, selling R32 or some of the, WRX or some of the top-end supercar to Japan market only. But nowadays, Japan sports car, consumption is pretty low. They need to look at the, overseas market. And as Abe said, Japanese companies pretty not so good at marketing.
I think one of the biggest challenges was in the late 90s when, a sport compact car was all the rage. Like you would always tune a Civic, you always tune a Sentra SCR, GTIs. I mean, you name it. Like you tune anything, and they're all people in their 20s. But I think all the car companies came out. If you ever looked at like a catalog, like an actual physical catalog from that era of the late 90s, early 2000s, the cars were kind of coming to this point where they became little boy racer cars. So you can always get wings for it, you can always get graphics for it. And then the SUVs came, right? Everybody wanted an SUV, especially in the States, and they banked on that, right? The Hummers came out, the huge Escalades, Explorers. I mean, all the stuff started coming out, and that's what people really wanted at the time. Because all the people who were playing with the smaller cars, in our age group, in the early 2000s, we grew up, we got better jobs and moved on to different things, and nobody came in to fill that gap. So it kind of burned everybody. And you look at all the cars, it just, sometime in the early 2000s, everything went to economy cars, right? All the Corollas got kind of boring. All the Civics were such fun cars. They got really boring and dry. Nissan, unfortunately, everything just got terrible.
Yeah.
right? Other than the GTR, everything just came really bad. The Versa, the Sentra, the Versa, I mean, Altima,
the Maxima.
yeah, everything got a CVT. It was just horrendous. Yeah, and I don't know what happened, but I think there's a resurrection of this right now today.
Yeah.
Like today, the guys that are in their 20s in that time are now in their 40s and 50s, and then their kids are fleeing the house. You know, the empty nesters, they want to go relive that, and that's why all the cars from the 70s, 80s, and 90s are going up in value so much. And all new cars are representing what the old cars are like and how they're going to feel. And we're going to be buying those. Like, I'm interested in the Civic Type R. That looks like a lot of fun. Or the new Integra, whenever that thing's going to come out. I'm very excited about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I am really excited about this resurgence of some of the Japanese sports cars. I mean, one of the things that's happened over the past 15 or 20 years is that, exactly as Terrance was saying, cars have gotten bigger, safer, and they've gotten more features, which makes them way less fun to drive. Like even the average BMW or Mercedes or Honda, you know, they used to be really fun cars, and they're just not anymore. I am really excited to see a resurgence. I mean, between the Hyundai N-Line, the new BRs, the GT86 coming out. I mean, that looks like a pretty interesting car. You know, 2,800 pounds and 227 horsepower. Like that, I would have been super excited about that as a kid. You know, the Honda Prelude, I remember, was one of my dream cars when I was in college. And you know, the Prelude. Yeah, the Prelude VTEC, it had, you know, this incredible 190 horsepower 2.2 liter four cylinder, and it weighed roughly 2,800 pounds. Yeah. I remember I convinced the Honda dealer in Oakland to let me take one out, and I did a rolling burnout through the first intersection and just thought that was the best car ever.
Rolling burnout.
And you know, it's four-wheel drive, so it and you know, the BRZ is going to be faster. That'll be interesting to see.
Yeah.
OWS. Wasn't it? Rear wheel, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they also had the super handling all-wheel drive, which was very interesting. Very at the time, I remember reading a Road and Track magazine. It was the second best handling car next to like a 360 or something like that. It was like a 1.1 G's in a quarter on street tires. No car out there can do that on street tires at the time. Yeah, but you had this Prelude that was like, you know, at a sticker of $28,000, which was faster than nearly anything out there on a skid pad. Yeah.
But you know, one other observation I've seen too is that I think the reason one of the few reasons why, you know, some of these older cars are also seeing a resurgence too is because, you know, as Terrance, you mentioned the empty nesters. But I think in every generation, you know, kind of like, you know, the 70s muscle cars, right? They were all, I mean, I remember it back in high school, I would read, oh my gosh, there was this Superbird that went for like $100,000. And I'm scratching my head. I'm like, who would pay for this? Why would you not buy, you know, a 288 GTO in Europe? In fact, in Europe, people are scratching their heads going, what is this? You know, why would you not buy a Ferrari or a Lamborghini or something like that? And it really comes down to like Wendy's ex-CEO or late CEO, Dave. I mean, he had a great muscle car collection, right? And nobody really understood that. I mean, like for me, I would never want to drive a muscle car, but I think, you know, now those muscle cars are kind of like our today's, you know, 91 Civics and whatnot. And so us getting into them and restoring them, it brings us back to that particular moment in time where it was just kind of like fun, you know, gosh, you know, I didn't have to worry about, you know, mortgages. I didn't have to worry about, you know, health plans and yada, yada, yada. It was just, hey, get in there. Hey, are those 15x7 Momos? Hey, are my center lock, you know, wheel caps, you know, locked in there, you know, proper. And you just, you know, go cruising, maybe drive down to a car show down in LA or something, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know, over last 1.5 years of COVID, as well as sort of, you know, everybody feels the sort of end of internal combustion engine is opening, you know, expanding a classic car market at quite a rapid pace. Especially, you know, when you look at the Porsche and BMW, it's like a, you know, 80s G-body cars and 90s 964 and 993 just went up value by 50% over last 6 months.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think it was like a week or two ago, 97,
88.
99 well, yeah, well, there's this 993 C4S, complete stock. It was like 18,000 miles, sold for 150 on Bring a Trailer.
Yeah.
That car was a $45,000 car 15 years ago.
Yeah. Well, there's a G50 just went, I think, at 80.
Yeah.
100.
Yeah,
right?
that you saw that? Yeah, it went for 102,000 or something. It was
Yeah, that's
crazy.
that's Gen and my friend Eric.
Yeah.
It's like 120,000 miles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For $110,000.
Yeah. $1 per mile.
Yeah.
$1 per 1,000 miles.
And the weird thing is, and the interesting thing is, pre 1974 long hood market is pretty stable. So I guess my observation is probably younger, first time classic car
Yep.
buyer is moving into the market and find sort of a late air-cooled car or car like M3 and these cars are entry-level car. So
Right.
I think things are really changing and kid, maybe it's time for you to buy older car.
Yeah.
Maybe it is.
Well, I think, talking about like older 911s, I think, in the last probably 10 years, I mean, you have, these guys, like your Magnus Walker, your Rob Dixon, with a Singer, and they're heavily promoting kind of like the coolness of older 911s. And that has also kind of, propped up because, back when we were in high school, I don't think we've ever seen anybody, mention, hey, these 901s and 902s are super cool. You got to get your hands on them. In fact, you could pick up a 72, 73 911S back then, right, Gen? For about less than $30,000? Nobody wanted those, right?
Even less. Yeah.
Yeah, even less.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. And if you guys take notice of the 240Z market, that's also slowly climbing up too. And I think it's the new Matrix movie that's coming up, or it could be the John Wick movie with Keanu Reeves. The 240Z is a hero car. So yeah,
Interesting.
Again, Nissan.
Yeah, and you also have Larry Chen, from the Hoonigan guys. He's quite the influencer these days. He's got a beautiful 240Z.
Yes.
Really nice, well done. Extremely well. I think he got I remember watching some video, he got married in it. It's like the perfect 240Z. I love that car.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, hey, it's been fun catching up about cars. Maybe I'm convinced. Maybe I do need to drive some older cars again. So, if you ever have your R32 around, I'd love to take it for a drive at some point.
Yeah, anytime. And I think Gen needs to drive that R32 because I understand what Gen was talking about because the 80s, there were a lot of these so-called technologies. I mean, and that's what kind of went into the marketing of the car. You had like this thing called the Hikis,
Whatever.
Yeah. And so some of the guys now have the Hikis Delete. People are going with single turbos instead of twin turbos. Some people are adding 6-speed instead of 5. Other people are just basically lessening the weight and stiffening the suspension. So yeah, I mean it still doesn't feel like a 911, but I think you'll you know what, Terrance is going to get the next ride.
Awesome.
Yeah, I need to drive one of those. It's the Gran Turismo car again. I have to go kind of get into some one of those cars. Yeah, but definitely want to try 32. What's that Mitsubishi thing at the time? The GTO? No, not a GTO.
GTO, yeah.
The FTO?
FTO, yes. I feel like I'm
front-wheel drive FTO?
FTO, but I love the way the FTO looks. Yeah,
I do too, but they actually drive terribly from what I hear.
Correct. Yeah.
All right, guys. Hey, it's been fun. Thank you very much for being here, and I'm looking forward to doing this again sometime soon.
Thank you, Kit. Thank you, Terrance.
All right.
Thank you again.
Good seeing everybody.
Good night, guys.
All right. Good night, guys.